remember, you're listening to nothing but the best.
Chip.
Coming to you live.
Chip.
From Skywalker Studios.
What's going on, Cowboys universe? Welcome back to another episode of the Late Night Hype. We got a special guest in the building today. CBS writer Patrik No C Walker. No C in the name, y'all. Here we go. Hey, Pat.
Yo.
I know we had our little disagreement on baseball, but we still cool, all right?
That's water under the bridge. The water under the bridge.
Man. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm excited for this one. I really am excited for this one because we got science in the building.
Science.
You need to trademark that.
Blinding
I
me
know
with
it's a word that everybody uses.
Hashtag science.
Hashtag science is in the building, man. Give it up for Patrik Walker, ladies and gentlemen. What's going on, bro?
I'm blessed, man. I appreciate y'all having me on. Y'all got a wonderful show jumping off here, and I'm just trying to get a piece of y'all action, man. I like what y'all got going on, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us, man. Law, Big Game James, what's up?
Man, what's good, man? We was kicking it off air. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's why you members need to get a member because you can get all that good fruit.
Yeah, y'all can see him come at me about our Braves. I ain't gonna realize it's ours.
That ain't your Braves.
I can't say it's ours.
Braves now.
We got let's keep these pronouns in order because you admitted that they were our Braves, and then you fell back, you know, like you stepped on a banana peel. Yeah,
get my Chipper Jones jersey, man.
We'll get him. I'll get him back right.
Yeah, get him back right.
Yeah,
you're gonna need a whole year.
I got to get him on Acuna and Ozzy and Freddie.
I do know. See, I know a couple of them, but I don't. You know what? You're gonna get me. Yeah, just a couple. I'm just keeping it a bean.
He said a couple.
Gotta respect the man and keep it real, man.
I do respect the man that keep it real. I can respect that.
Come on,
straight
here
shooter.
lie, man.
You know. But keep in mind, just because you're a straight shooter don't mean you hitting the bullseye.
Oh man, I'm done. I'm done because he be throwing.
That's why you gotta love
him. He be throwing them around.
You don't care who you are.
That's the science of it.
That's the science.
Hey Pat, don't be coming on here treating me like a Twitter troll, man.
Come on, brother. It's all love, man. It's all love.
Oh man, it's gonna be great, brother. Hey, listen. While we can disagree about the Braves right now, one thing we can agree about is what the hell was going on with these here Cowboys, guys. A lot has happened today. The rookies are reporting to camp. You got the Dak Prescott contract situation, and then you got D-Law and a couple people around the league talking about possibly, not reporting to camp or what have you.
Yeah, right.
So, where do you want to start here, James?
Oh, we got to start off with Mr. Dak Prescott because we was just talking earlier today. We was talking about Charlie Casserly or whatever the hell his old ass name is, giving all these stuff about Dak. We don't want to hear. We need to hear the real science about Dak Prescott and what really happened with these negotiations, Mr. Pat Walker. Tell us what really happened, man.
All right, so at the end of the day, and I've been having conversations with sources, for the better part of a year when it comes to the negotiations between Dak and the Cowboys. And at the end of the day, as it approached the deadline of July 15th, there was no indication from any source on any side of the table that this deal would not get done. Now, I got messages that ranged from, quote, it doesn't look good, but then the pendulum swung to the other side and said, well, Pat, there's still time. So we kind of played it out, let it see how it went. But even those that were pessimistic, as far as the sources that I had conversations with, even they thought that at the end of the day, the Cowboys would be the ones to cave. And for those that don't know what the main sticking point was, and I broke this news back in early February before it hit the news cycle, was that it was no longer about the money, it was about the length. So the Cowboys wanted to initially go long. So when they approached Dak Prescott in the summer of 2019, after they got the deal done with Tank, they approached him with a 6 or 7 year deal. Wow. Dak Prescott countered that with 3. Now, this is the negotiation process. Dak knew, or the Cowboys knew, he wasn't going to sign for 7. And Dak knew they weren't going to agree to 3. But you start high, they start low. That's how it goes. The hiccup in the plan was Ezekiel Elliott. So when Ezekiel Elliott ended up holding out of training camp and then ultimately got awarded his deal, the Cowboys looked at the length of his deal and the expiration thereof, and they said to themselves, well, let's try to marry Dak's contract length and the expiration thereof with Ezekiel Elliott, which is perfect in theory, right? They came in together. You would ideally like to see them go out together. But that put them at around 6. Kellen Moore had his growing pains, but Dak Prescott had a career year as an individual. Despite the team, the wide receiver core leading the league in drops, Dak Prescott was still only 1 or 2 yards away from passing Tony Romo as the Cowboys single season passing leader. So he could have easily blown past 5,000. Now that offer was upwards of 5 years, averaged around $35 million a year. And they were trying to keep it in line with more so like Russell Wilson. What Russell Wilson got awarded in April of last year.
Yeah.
Another hiccup in their plan, though, if you take a step back, was the Carson Wentz deal and the Jared Goff deal. Neither of those things were supposed to land as far as if you're Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones. They weren't expecting either of those to land at that point.
Let me interject on that point real quick.
Yeah.
Isn't that a lack of foresight, though, on Jerry's behalf?
I think it's less a lack of foresight and more a bit of pride. And I say pride because you talk about someone like Jerry Jones, and Jerry Jones, even if the legend only exists in his mind going forward, he's the consummate deal closer. Now, that has been proven true time and again, but as of late, he's been kind of struggling with that. The team has not been closing the deals that they want to close, i.e. Dak Prescott being one example. So I think Jerry Jones looked at it as, well, you know what, we weren't expecting Carson Wentz's deal to land this early. We weren't expecting Jared Goff's deal to land this early. But you know what? Like he said, and his quote was, I don't get hand cramps when I write checks. He figured at the end of the day, he would get what he wanted, and that would be Dak Prescott. The problem is, even down to the deadline of July 15th, the Cowboys were still holding firm on 5 years. Dak Prescott was still holding firm on 4. How the days went leading up to that deadline were, there were soft conversations. So I know there were reports out there saying there had been no conversations. Those are inaccurate. There were some very soft, unofficial nudges in both directions to kind of see how things were going to shape up in the witching hour. Once the witching hour approached, Stephen Jones, I'm told, basically reached out to Todd France, Dak Prescott's representation, and said, hey, we need to get this done. Can we get Dak on the phone? Like, let's kind of do this. Now, sidebar, this is a tactic that Stephen Jones has employed before. He did it with DeMarcus Lawrence. Keeping in mind that DeMarcus Lawrence was up against the deadline to get that surgery done on his shoulder. And the only reason that deal finally got done right ahead of that invisible deadline. I say invisible deadline because if he didn't get it soft deadline. If he didn't get it done by that point, he might miss games. He might have missed some games at the front of 2019. It was Stephen Jones. It didn't circumvent Tank's agent, but he demanded Tank to get on the line. So they had that conversation. It was Tank and Stephen Jones who were able to hash out the deal. Now, because that worked for Stephen Jones, he felt like he could do it again. with France and Prescott. And at the end of the day, Prescott did end up getting on the line with Stephen Jones. But the problem was when you have a contract of any nature, but especially a mega contract like this, not only do you have to agree to terms, you have to get the contract drawn up. You have to get the contract language hammered out. That can take hours, upwards of 1 or 2 days. But if you have pristine lawyers, let's say you can get it banged out in 10 to 12 hours. Well, if they're having this conversation at 1 p.m. on deadline day, the likelihood of them, A, agreeing to terms, and B, having time to get the contract drawn up and sent over to the league office for finalization, they were already up against it. So in the end, what happened was they started racing to try to get something done. I am told that the Cowboys, even their final offer to Dak on deadline day, was still 5 years. Dak was a little bit more amicable to going ahead and agreeing to that 5 to go ahead and get the deal done. But the clock just was not in their favor. So believe it or not,
that was true.
Yes, that's true. So believe it or not, when it all came down to it, this deal was still one okay from both sides agreeing to terms, but they figured out in looking at the clock and talking to their attorneys on both sides, they said, hey, even if you guys agree to terms, we're not going to be able to get this drawn up and get this over to the league office in time. So basically all parties involved played the deadline game to the death of the contract.
That's some good information there. And speaking of Todd France, he's the same guy that represented Aaron Donald that did similar tactics as it relates to, hey, standing firm. Remember Aaron Donald, he had to set out or hold out for his money. And I think in that when we look at this and Stephen Jones and his particular mindset, you're making a unique situation now. And what do they do from here, though? We got 31 million off the cap. So how can we work out this science piece?
This is such a massive fumble by the Cowboys, and I say more so the Cowboys than France and Prescott, because at the end of the day, Prescott, who earned only $2 million last year, a total of just under $5 million over the first 4 years, now he's guaranteed to get 31.4. So I was told that he was frustrated by how it ended. Not frustrated with the team, but frustrated that things didn't play out on the chessboard how he thought they would by playing the deadline game, and that's understandable. But he's not mad at being guaranteed $31.4 million. Right. It's a hell of a pay raise. Yeah. But for the Cowboys, now guess what? They still don't have their franchise quarterback locked up for the future. And now you're bringing in Mike McCarthy, who by all accounts is a quarterback whisperer. You're combining the experience of Mike McCarthy with the creativity and youth and talent of Kellen Moore, which was on display when Dak Prescott had a career season as an individual last year. And all signs point north for Prescott in 2020. And if he plays equal or greater than what he did in 2019, then now you're going to not only probably end up giving him the 4-year deal that you tried not to give him the year prior, the offseason prior, but now you're going to be tap dancing around $40 million. And you didn't want to have to do that, because if you look at Patrick Mahomes' deal, and the easy math is, it's a 10-year deal, it's $503 million, it's 50.3 average or million per year, but that's not actually how it breaks down. If you look at his new money, the first 4 years of his new money are only $39.5 million on average. So the Cowboys could have gotten away with a 4-year deal on Dak Prescott at around $38 million a year, and he'd be good to go. So now he plays up, or he levels up again. The market's going to go up. You're going to pay more, even if they franchise tag him next year while they try to work it out. If they don't get something worked out by July 15th next year and they franchise tag him, that's $37.7 million. And that's going to be potentially on a smaller cap because of the COVID-19 hit. You're not going to have fans in the stands. You're going to take a revenue hit. And they're still trying to figure out if they're going to take the hit up front as far as NFLPA and NFL, or are they going to spread it? But nonetheless, you're going to take a hit. Potentially smaller cap versus a higher salary, a higher contract that you're going to have to give. But what makes it worse for the Cowboys, guys, is any chance they might have thought they had at trying to woo someone like Jamal Adams, for example, trying to get Joe Douglas in New York. It was already unlikely, as I've constantly reported. But it's even more unlikely now, because had they extended Prescott, they could have structured the contract in a way that would have reduced the year one cap hit. But now you're getting knocked in the head for 31.4. You still got to sign your rookies, your draft picks. That's going to put them at an average, I'd say around $8 million in available cap space. Even if Joe Douglas had a stroke and forgot that he hates the Cowboys, they no longer have the cap space to make a blockbuster move like that. So they've really handcuffed themselves. So no matter how you look at it, that's why I say Dak, he took a little bit of a loss by the deal not being done. And the loss is obviously security. He's hyper durable, but it's still football, right? Knock on wood. What if he gets blank? I'm not going to say the word, but what if he gets blank? That's the reality of a franchise tag. But for the Cowboys, I mean, you're looking at L's left and right. You're going to end up paying more later. You got less cap to do any kind of major trade now. The market's not in your favor. You might have a smaller cap next year. You don't have a replacement. Andy Dalton's not the replacement.
Oh, good.
Oh,
so
Lord, don't start.
For those that say, "Oh, well, just re-sign
re-sign
Andy Dalton next year." Yeah, just re-sign Andy Dalton next year and let him be. Listen, Andy Dalton has proven himself a capable winner in the regular season. He's also proven himself a very bad quarterback in the postseason. And as a Cowboys fan, why would you champion having a guy that's so unproven or I should say, has proven himself to be a poor starting quarterback in the postseason?
Very poor.
Andy Dalton is what he is, and he could be a phenomenal backup for Dak Prescott. If he has to come in and play in October, I'm not as concerned about that. I think he can get 2 or 3 wins in October, November, maybe even December. If you're depending on him in January, you're in trouble.
Hey, I just want you to be able to put this out there too, because I get so much kickback from people who's pro Andy is saying, hey, he never had this amount of talent. Can you explain to the people? Because I know you know
shot that down.
Can you explain to the people how much talent he had and especially the level of defense that he was playing with too?
I think those who say that live in a box. And the box, the label on the box says Dallas. The problem with a lot of fans and also some media is that when they're doing their so-called analysis, they do it with beer goggles on or in tunnel vision. They don't look at, okay, well, Andy Dalton didn't have the talent in Cincinnati that he has in Dallas. Well, that's untrue. But I think the problem is they weren't watching Bengals games, because guess what? Who was, if you're not a Bengals fan, right?
Right.
Right.
But keeping in mind what I just mentioned was Andy Dalton has proven himself a capable winner in the regular season, but you can't win in the regular season if you don't have talent in the NFL, and he certainly had that even before the injury bug bit AJ Green, right? That duo alone was one of the most dynamic duos in the league. So he's had firepower at wide receiver. He's had a strong offensive line. He's had running back talent. He's had a defense. He's had a defense. I mean, we're really not going to act like Geno Atkins is somebody you pick up at Dollar Tree, right? So he's had a defense, and he simply could not get over the hump in the postseason. If you look at his production in the regular season versus the postseason, there's this correlation when they were getting into the playoffs. I think they did it 2 or 3 consecutive years. He completely fell apart in the playoffs. And it was, you couldn't attribute it to injury surrounding him, players at skill positions. You couldn't attribute it to injury on Dalton. And you're hard pressed to convince me that all of a sudden, the coach who got them to the playoffs instantly forgot how to coach. I think Dalton, as good of a quarterback as he can be, he shrinks when the lights get brighter. And until I see otherwise, I won't be convinced otherwise. So that's what, when you're talking about, narratives that, oh, well, he didn't have the talent that he's going to have in Dallas, you could apply that argument to a lot of talented quarterbacks that are. Let's talk about Matthew Stafford.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Right, it's a similar kind of situation. Matthew Stafford, and subjectively speaking, that's my guy. Go Dogs, right? But objectively speaking, he has had he had Megatron. I don't have to name anyone else really, but I could. But he had Megatron. And Megatron couldn't be stopped, as Cowboys fans all know. And let's not blame Brandon Carr for what happened in Detroit that day. But at the end of the day, you have talented quarterbacks, and just because they're talented and just because they have a bunch of talent around them does not automatically make them that guy. I believe Dak Prescott can be that guy. Mike McCarthy believes it. Jerry Jones believes it. Stephen Jones believes it. I think the problem with it all when it came to the contract is Jerry should have jumped in and just pulled a Jerry.
Yeah,
right. And just said, hey, we're going to get this done. Everyone needs to understand what's happening when it comes to the Cowboys. The buck stops with Jerry, of course. But over the past few seasons, he's been delegating.
Mouthpiece.
Yeah, he's been delegating a whole lot more. You're talking about Will McClay. You're talking about Stephen Jones. And this is a transition period for the Cowboys. Jerry Jones will never admit this publicly. But if you look at the moves, whether it be the draft, the free agency moves that they've made and have not made over the past few years, it doesn't feel Jerry-ish, right? They're a much more frugal team. The purse strings are very tight. They try to play deadline games, and sometimes it works in their favor. It worked in their favor with DeMarcus Lawrence. It worked in their favor with Ezekiel Elliott. They thought it worked in their favor with Dak Prescott, and it blew up in their face. But that's a Stephen Jones tactic. And this is not to demonize Stephen Jones. It's simply to say there's a difference between him and his father. His father is willing to throw as much money at the situation as possible if he thinks it's a winning situation. Stephen Jones can believe it's a winning situation, but he still wants to play the game. He still wants to look like he came out the winner in any particular negotiation. But when it comes to Dak Prescott, they came out looking like the loser. But for those that are saying, oh, well, he's on a franchise tag now, so trade him or let him walk next offseason. Listen, Andy Dalton is being paid about $100,000 more, maybe more, but a little bit over what they were going to pay Cooper Rush. But I just told everyone that they offered Dak Prescott an average of $35 million a year. Who do you think they believe in? Exactly. The $2 million guy or the guy that they were going to give $110 million guaranteed?
There's people in the comments that I don't think really understand Andy Dalton in the playoffs. So let me give you some numbers, guys.
Yeah, hit him.
He has one touchdown.
Here's the science. 1 touchdown,
6 interceptions on 55% completion in the playoffs. Okay, guys, we're not talking about him having a 4-to-3 ratio or anything like that. Like he's been average or, his team just hasn't gotten it done for him. No, he sucks in the playoffs. So I'm not trying to hear all this, Andy Dalton's been
brighter the lights for Andy Dalton, the more he's shrunk at his position. And for a fandom, here's some irony. And I'm talking about this is some spicy irony. This has all kinds of cayenne pepper over it.
Give it to us.
For those that subscribe to the narrative that Tony Romo was not clutch, despite the numbers proving otherwise, that same faction of fandom is would now have us believe that Andy Dalton is clutch and can be.
Are you kidding me?
That's the whole. You have to on some level believe that Andy Dalton can lead this team to the Super Bowl. If you're one of those people that are saying, oh, well, let Dak walk, trade Dak, whatever the case may be. Well, if you have that much confidence in Andy Dalton, despite the numbers telling you otherwise in his postseason failure, it's ironic that a lot of these individuals that I've seen out here spewing that nonsense, for lack of a better way to put it, are the same ones that are saying, well, Romo couldn't deliver because he was anti-clutch or he couldn't deliver in the fourth quarter. Well, Romo proved that he could deliver in the fourth quarter, but you want to replace Dak, who's also clutch, right? He's proven clutch as well, and hyper durable, with a guy who basically couldn't find a job anywhere this offseason, so he took a hometown discount to come with the Cowboys to rebuild his brand in the hopes that he could get a bigger contract in the offseason with another team. This is a pit stop for Andy Dalton.
People in his
Oh my God.
It's unbelievable.
It's like
someone just
I just want to
me,
say something about them comments.
one more time. Someone asked me, James, now tell me Dak's playoff stats in the playoffs. Do you really want me to do that? Because I can't.
No.
7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 95 quarterback rating, and he completes 64% of his passes. So don't
now tell me Carson Wentz's playoff record.
3 yards.
Give me his stats.
I'll show you, Derek.
One playoff drive, didn't complete the drive because he left with a concussion. So in the first 4 years of his NFL career, right, he's only started in the playoffs once, didn't even finish the drive. So if we're talking about, what's Dak's numbers in the postseason? Okay, we're talking about market value. We're talking about contracts. We're talking about the fact that if Carson Wentz got paid, you cannot turn around and say Dak Prescott should not get paid. I don't care about your feels and your emotions, and I don't think Carson Wentz should have gotten paid either. Doesn't matter because he did. So because that's on the table, you can't ignore the fact it's on the table, and that's Todd France and Dak Prescott aren't ignoring what Jared Goff got paid. They're not ignoring what Carson Wentz got paid. You think Todd France is saying, "Oh, well, Carson Wentz shouldn't have gotten paid, so let's lower my client's price." Like, get out of here.
Patrik, I got to ask you this right quick because a lot of people are going to throw out these stats, and they really brings in partial truth, and you know how that goes, right? Yeah. The 1-7 situation for Dak Prescott last year. Any way that you can give your thoughts to the people about that 1-7 against playoff teams or teams above 500, what have you? Can you break down that narrative that everybody talk about? Well, you shouldn't pay him for that particular reason.
Let me make sure that everyone understands. For those that may not know me well, may not follow me on Twitter at Voice of the Star, shameless plug, who may not have been reading my CBS plug. Yeah, shameless plug. May not have been reading my CBS sports pieces. I am neither a pessimist or optimist. I'm not an apologist for any particular player. I'm a realist. I shoot straight, right down the middle. What you get is what you get. That's the science of it, right? How it makes you feel is your problem. The facts are my problem. The facts are Dak Prescott struggled in those games. That's a fact. In some of those games anyway. So let's not take the demerits away from him in that capacity. In that same breath, why are we not talking about these drops from these wide receivers? When in the context of trying to figure out why he was 1-7 against, playoff teams and playoff caliber teams? Right. Why are we not talking about the drops? Why are we not talking about the Cowboys' defensive struggles against the run? Why are we not talking about, although they had a shutdown corner in Byron Jones, how Byron Jones didn't have the complement opposite him because Chidobe Awuzie took a step back in 2019. So the secondary more or less struggled. These are the same people. Why did Dak go 1-7? Okay, well, I'm so glad Jeff Heath is gone. Why are you glad Jeff Heath is gone? Oh, because quote unquote he sucked as a safety. Well, guess what? He was your safety. So if you feel like Jeff Heath struggled as a safety and you wanted Earl Thomas, you want Jamal Adams, you want these all-pro safeties. Well, you want these all-pro safeties because you admit that your safety beside Xavier Woods is a hole. That's a hole in your defense. You had another hole opposite Byron Jones. Move forward to the defensive line. Antoine Wood struggled with injury last season. So you had a hole at nose tackle, right? Tristan Hill didn't pan out. Now, he might pan out down the road, but he didn't in his first year. He was inactive and a healthy scratch for much of his rookie season. DeMarcus Lawrence, he didn't produce from a sack perspective, but he's still one of the best run stoppers. But Robert Quinn went off. So you have these edge rushers getting off, but your interior on your defense is just not cutting it. Let's talk about how LVE was injured and missed half of the season, right? A Pro Bowl linebacker you lost for half the season, which then caused your other Pro Bowl caliber linebacker and Jalen Smith to take a step back because guess what? Now he was tasked with helping to fill the void that not having LVE created, but also they were utilizing him more in blitz coverage and pass rush assistance. That's why he had a career high in sacks. So he was still trying to figure out, well, how do I cover well and blitz well? Now, he did the blitzing well, but he couldn't do both well at the same time. And you've seen in the year prior, 2018, he didn't blitz as much, but he was fantastic in coverage. He was carrying tight ends up the seam, right? That was a different Jalen Smith. You have all of these question marks, the defensive interior, the linebacking core, opposite Byron Jones. What about
your coach?
Man, I'm about to say,
he said the coach.
Your coach.
Right. What about now coach? That's defense.
Yeah.
So we're
I'm just saying your
defense.
coach.
Now let's go. Let's talk about coach. Let's talk about coach. So that's the defensive holes. So that all helped fuel 1-7. So now let's talk about offense. Let's talk about how how although Kellen Moore did very well, and I predicted he'd have growing pains, he did have growing pains. Yeah. He got away from what was working several times over the course of those games that we're talking about. Let's talk about how Jason Garrett, he had his liberal moments as far as play calling goes, but for the most part, it was still the same conservative Jason Garrett who would run first on seemingly every first down. Just predictable. Like the other team knew right out of the box what the Cowboys were going to do on first down. Every single first down, they were going to hand the ball off. And you wonder what type of influence did Jason Garrett have on Kellen Moore? Now, I'm told Jason Garrett he wasn't calling the plays, but there was still influence in the meeting room on a weekly basis. So Kellen Moore, obviously, it's his first year on the job as an offensive coordinator. He's going to defer more to, his head coach who gave him the opportunity. He doesn't really want to piss off his head coach. So the head coach last week, or heading into this game coming up this weekend, is saying, hey, we need to run the ball more. Kellen Moore was basically like, okay,
boss.
Okay. So instead of the Cowboys taking what the offense gave them on a consistent basis, they kept trying to force the issue. And there was a lot of times where it just felt like Jason Garrett's offense kept showing its head versus what we thought Kellen Moore's offense would be. So you got the coaching issues, you got the drops on offense. You're still trying to figure out what the hell's going on at left guard. Okay. You lost Connor McGovern before he took a snap in training camp, right? Connor Williams, you ended up losing him later in the year. So you have offensive line questions. Zeke was still Zeke, but Tony Pollard didn't get unleashed like he could have because of the coaching and the offensive play calling and how it became uneven sometimes. You'd see Tony Pollard start to go off one game. I think there was one game in particular where both him and Zeke just went off. And
next week,
then the next game,
Miami,
the Saints.
Next week it was like 5 snaps.
Yeah, actually, it was 0 snaps against the Saints. Right,
he played a couple
Mention
snaps.
Jason Witten too, please. Mention Jason Witten.
Touches. That's what I'm referring to. Touches.
Okay.
So he'd get like 4 or 5 touches, and then those touches would be completely inconsequential.
Oh, he didn't get any against the Saints, but that's
so
neither here nor there.
Don't take the cloak of blame off of Dak for the things that he did wrong that contributed, because all of his passes weren't pristine in those losses. But guess what? All of his passes weren't pristine in the wins either, right? But more often than not, he was threading needles. For those that are saying, oh, well, he's, dinking Dak, whatever that corny ass line is. He was top 2, if not top 1 in deep ball accuracy for most of last year. So he improved the deep ball because he improved his torque on his core and his footwork. His footwork is light years beyond. And shouts out to John Kitna for what he did for Dak Prescott. So the fundamentals have been refined on Dak Prescott, and that's why he can now be more accurate throwing the ball deep, et cetera, et cetera. But there are so many other holes, coaching and, left guard as far as protection there goes, and the underutilization of Tony Pollard. And what did they get from Tavon Austin last year in the receiving court? Nothing. So you had Michael Gallup go off, and Amari Cooper did what Amari Cooper gets paid to do. But was he really the same Amari Cooper that we saw when he in the first few games after he got traded to the Cowboys? And I'm not talking about ability. I'm talking about several, and I can confirm this. For those wondering what happened to Cooper in December. So they're saying, oh, well, he mentally checked out. Well, that's not what happened. People try to attach that to the narrative that was on him in Oakland with the Raiders, and that, oh, well, he checks out mentally. He doesn't care about football. No, that guy was battling 2 or 3 different lower body injuries over the course of the season. But how many games did he miss? So he tried, and he started, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, he started all 16. But he didn't play the totality of all 16. So some of those games you saw him get pulled early, it was because of, 1, injury management. And sometimes it was because the coach just did something weird. Like I can confirm that on 2 separate occasions when Amari Cooper came out early in those games, it wasn't necessarily injury management. It was simply because the coaches were quote unquote trying to do something different. So so you pull Amari Cooper off the field.
Game, and
you pull Amari Cooper off the field. There you go. You pull Amari Cooper off the field, and now guess what the defense gets to do? They get to shade help over on Michael Gallup, who had an issue with drops as well, despite going off for over 1,000 yards last season. But then who's your secondary threat if Cooper's not on the field? And if Cooper's on the field, who's your third and who's your tertiary threat? It wasn't Tavon Austin.
Well, see, that's where coaching.
And they were sitting Devin Smith.
It wasn't Devin Smith. It was Devin Smith against the Redskins. I think
that's where coaching.
One game, one play.
Is very important, and where people. It's not about being excuses, guys, because we can go back to Carson Wentz, right? Everyone loves to talk about Carson Wentz won the division with practice squad, wide receivers, and yada, yada, yada. No. Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz, and the Eagles won that game because 7 receptions, 7 came with those practice squad wide receivers.
Are we really holding up 9 and 7 as some type of...
I'm getting there.
Stop that.
I'm getting there. And so we act like it wasn't Dallas Goedert, who's a beast, Zach Ertz, who's a beast, and Miles Sanders, who's a beast, didn't kill us in that game. And then people hold this 9 and 7 as if Carson Wentz was killing the whole year and had them 12 and 4. This is not true, guys. What happened was coaching took advantage of a poor coach team in the Dallas Cowboys to win a division because we both lost to poor teams. We both beat the weak teams.
Is better than Jason Garrett
by a mile.
Okay, but can I say
Doug
this?
Peterson is the same. Keep in mind, Doug Peterson is the same coach that Carson Wentz was having an MVP caliber season during their Super Bowl run, and he got injured in late December. Doug Peterson inserts Nick Foles, who hadn't done anything in his career up to that point other than bounce around from team to team, and he takes that guy and turns him into a Super Bowl MVP. Does anyone on the planet Earth or any of the other 8 revolving it is Pluto still a planet? I don't think so. So the other 7, right? Let's get the science right. So does anyone in this solar system think that Jason Garrett could have turned a backup quarterback coming in January into a Super Bowl MVP? So yes, we're talking about coaching.
I'm not mistaken, Patrick. Doesn't he have only 1 victory without Dak or Tony in his career?
That sounds about that sounds almost accurate. If you go back and look at
Matt
Castle against the
2015 season, right? Go back and look at the 2015 season. The Cowboys were 1-11 without Tony Romo and 4-1 with him that season. The 1-11, what was that? 2 or 3 quarterbacks? You had Wheaton, you had Castle. I think that was 2, and Kellen, right? So between 3 different quarterbacks, you muster 1 win in 12 games. But we're going to pretend that that's not the same coach that's been that had been relegated to making Dak Prescott a success. And we're not going to completely just dump on Jason Garrett. I mean, he was the same coach that, led the team to, a couple of division wins, et cetera, et cetera. But he got long in the tooth.
Coach of the year, right?
Right. He was head coach of the year, but I think he got long in the tooth, but he made mistakes that ended up shooting holes in his own boat. And one of the biggest mistakes, and I will die on this hill, and I was on this hill when other people were like, "Oh, you gotta give him a chance," or it's Jason Garrett. Scott Linehan.
Oh my gosh.
The decision to ship out or to move Bill Callahan away from play calling to shoehorn Scott Linehan in, which ultimately led to Bill Callahan leaving because he was just pissed off. He was like, "I'm done here." You lose an elite play caller in Bill Callahan. And then after 2 or 3 years of struggling for the most part, because it started to be a decline. I think I wrote a piece about this last year. There was a numerical and a statistical decline every single season under Scott Linehan. Instead of seeing the writing on the wall and saying, well, Scott, it's time for you to go. If I'm Jason Garrett, they empowered him more. They gave him more power. They gave him the power to basically fire Dez, which is what it ultimately happened with Dez, right? They gave him the power to ship out a guy like Ryan Switzer because Switzer voiced concern over the Cowboys trying to use him as a running back more than a wide receiver. So you have these situations where the head coach was then allowing
his buddy,
an unsuccessful, more than a buddy. It was a weird dynamic, dude. It was a mentor-mentee because I think he felt like he owed Linehan because Linehan gave him his first coaching job in Miami as quarterbacks coach. And I think he felt like he was repaying the favor. Well, now both of you are out. And I think like now
old Witten.
Yeah. Witten. We love you, Witten. And I'm glad you mentioned that because that's kind of a spinoff of the Jason Garrett note. Yeah. When we're talking about the 1-7. if Jason Garrett isn't the head coach of the Cowboys in 2019, Jason Witten is not on the roster in 2019.
Wow.
That's an absolute fact. And it's not because the Cowboys have lack of reverence. We know how much they revere Jason Garrett, and rightfully so. First ballot Hall of Famer, you know, no one can question his resume. It is absolutely bulletproof. However, when he opted to retire and then come out of retirement, he wasn't the same Jason Witten. And that's saying a lot considering he already was losing a step prior to retirement. So Jason Garrett brought in Witten for stability, but what they should have been doing is finishing the job with Blake Jarwin. So the project that began with Blake Jarwin during the retirement year in 2018 of Jason Witten, instead of saying, well, Blake Jarwin, we see what you can do, especially in that game against the Giants. He set that franchise record, 3 touchdowns, just absolutely torched the Giants. Man. So what do you do on the heels of that game? Because that was week 17, right? So what do? You call Jason Witten. And you're like, oh, well, we need to have you. What are you doing?
It's the foresight. It makes no sense.
So that goes back. Now that's foresight or lack thereof. So Jason Witten, he was serviceable, but he took snaps away from Blake Jarwin. And if you're taking snaps away from the athletic playmaking tight end, those passes that went from Dak to Witten that were maybe 5-yard gains, 8-yard gains, you throw that to Jarwin, it's a 14-yard gain. Right, you throw that to Jarwin, and it's 6 yards after the catch instead of 1 yard after the catch, or a negative yard after the catch. Right,
patty feet.
Right. So, and again, this is not a knock to Witten. He should be revered. He's absolute Teflon in my book. But if we're talking realistically, he should not have been on the roster in 2019. It should have been Blake Jarwin's year to follow up on the work that they started with him in 2018. So now McCarthy comes in and he sees the mistake that Garrett made, and they didn't make an offer to Jason Witten at all. And I've been told that, and I can confirm that Jason Witten wanted to remain with the Cowboys. Obviously, he was very vocal about it. But Mike McCarthy, and this is where Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones did defer to McCarthy, and they said, well, hey, we want you to build the team how you see fit. And we've seen instances of that throughout the offseason, right? Dontarie Cole, Gerald McCoy, so forth and so on. Alden Smith, right? Mike McCarthy was like, Jarwin is it. And now that Jarwin has gotten the job, now you're going to see the potential for dynamic play, much more dynamic play from the tight end position. So now you got Dak Prescott entering with a much more seasoned and Super Bowl caliber coach, a talented offensive coordinator who has a year under his belt now. You add CeeDee Lamb to the mix. You got Michael Gallup coming off a breakout season. You got Amari Cooper, who's now completely healthy. And now you have an athletic tight end in Blake Jarwin, plus you got Ezekiel Elliott, plus you got Tony Pollard. If you unleash
that's
him.
That's why I said it's silly for letting him play on his tag.
Yeah, they fumbled, and it's there's no other way to put it. So for those that are saying, well, Dak, he went 1-7. Football is not golf
or tennis.
Tennis. It takes 22 guys on that field at any given time, 53 guys during the season at some point to contribute to a team winning the Super Bowl. Look at the team like the Kansas City Chiefs. Right. You think they only won because of Patrik Mahomes?
Goodness, no. But they'll tell you that.
You know how this goes.
No,
right.
You have the sung heroes like Honey Badger and Patrik and Tyreek and Mecole and so forth and so on. But at the same time, Chris Jones. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But then you look at the unsung heroes. And there are many more unsung heroes that help propel that team. They all ended up getting Andy Reid. Can we all agree that Andy Reid is better than Jason Garrett?
Oh my god,
yeah. I can agree with about a whole bunch of coaches better than Jason Garrett.
And I won't
he's a coordinator. He's a coordinator.
Finish that thought.
Sleep on Airbnb
Consider that though, and especially those in the comments right now. If you can agree that Andy Reid is and has always been a better coach than Jason Garrett, explain to me why Andy Reid just finally won his first Super Bowl. And it's not simply because of Patrik Mahomes. Now, it is also because of Mahomes, right? But the 49ers had Mahomes shut down for 3 quarters, right? Someone else had to step up. For the Cowboys, you had a coach that basically wasn't going to get you over the hump. You had consistent drops at wide receiver. You had defensive issues when it came to stopping the run. You had defensive issues at safety. You had issues with trying to shoehorn the dated tight end over the future at the position in Blake Jarwin. You had utilization issues with Tony Pollard, so forth.
You had
and so
utilization
on.
issues with Ezekiel Elliott. You
Right,
can run him on first down all the time. You don't utilize him out the backfield correctly. You only use him as a check down guy. And I'm seeing people in the comments here talking about drops. Okay, what they're trying to say is, Dak Prescott is responsible for so many drops, and I'm just sitting here like, listen, guys, like he said earlier, in this show here, Dak Prescott's all his passes were not on point in the bad games. We get it, but they weren't all on point in the good games either. And Cooper had a drop problem prior to coming to Dallas. Michael Gallup was dropping balls his rookie year. Like we can't just blame
even Jason Witten.
Who
never drops.
Yeah, Jason Witten had 5 drops.
Had drops and key drops. We're talking about potential first down, third down
Saints
conversions.
Game fumbles.
Right? Yeah. So
Patrik
yes, you can say Dak Prescott was 8-8 last year. That's fair. But in the same breath, you have to say the Cowboys were 8-8 last year, right? You can't splice the numbers to try to fit the narrative that you wanted to fit at any given point. Well, let's not pay Dak Prescott because the team was 8-8. Okay, well, why the hell did you pay Cooper if that's your narrative? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Why'd you pay
Zeke Elliott?
Why'd you pay Zeke Elliott? Why'd you pay DeMarcus Long? It's because these are cornerstone players that you have to get locked down, right? You can't just point the finger. And I get it, franchise quarterback, he's going to take all the blame and only a little of the credit. But let's just shoot it straight down the middle. Let's be scientific about it. The team went 8-8. So yes, Dak Prescott did not have every single pass that was perfect, but any receiver will tell you, any receiver at any level of the sport, and I can attest to this because I played both wide receiver and defensive back up and through some college. At the end of the day, if the ball hits your hands, that's a catch. No coach will excuse you dropping a ball that hits your hands. I don't need you to put it on the numbers all the time. If you could, that's fantastic. But if it hits my hands and I do not come up with that catch, that's on me. Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, none of them will come up to you and say that ball wasn't placed well. They get paid millions of dollars to catch balls that aren't placed well. So catch them. Catch him.
Michael Irvin said it. He said, I never told Troy Aikman to put it in between the numbers every single time. He said, just throw it in my area and I got you.
Proximity.
This is football, guys. This isn't computer coding.
Suddenly, when it comes to Dak Prescott, catch radius is not a thing.
Right.
There's no such thing as catch radius. When it comes to everybody else, right? You can, that receiver climbed the ladder. What a fantastic Deshaun Watson. We can agree Deshaun Watson is an elite quarterback. Right, Deshaun Watson is an elite quarterback.
I think he's in the same tier as Dak.
Guess what? Let's see how he looks without DeAndre Hopkins.
I like his receiving core.
Yeah, you love his receiving core.
I do like that receiver.
And I'm not saying that he's going to take a step back, but I'm saying a lot of the catches a lot of the receptions and catches that are on Deshaun Watson's career stat line that help propel the Texans to wins they probably should not have had are highlight catches from DeAndre Hopkins. One-handed Spider-Man, climb thin air, walk on the moon type catches. So when you lose a receiver like that, if you don't have a direct replacement, now Deshaun Watson, the reality is he's going to have to be more accurate with these new receivers than he had to be with DeAndre Hopkins. But Dak didn't have that luxury. And this is not excusing it away. This is just a simple fact. Was there a DeAndre Hopkins? Is there a DeAndre Hopkins in Dallas?
Coop ain't Hop. I love
Coop. Hop. And Gallup is more Dez Bryant than Hopkins, right? He's violent. He attacks the ball at the highest point. But again, he has some drop issues. DeAndre Hopkins, tell me when he's had drop issues. Right. To me, when it comes to hands, I mean, you could argue that Julio Jones and Michael Thomas are better all-around receivers. When it comes to hands, there are no hands better than DeAndre Hopkins, right? Yeah. So I think that when you have a receiver that's fantastic like that, it masks a lot of the imprecise passing. Dak hasn't had that. He's had to be more precise, but then they're dropping the precise passes, just like they're dropping the ones that are slightly to the left, slightly to the right.
But advanced analytics would tell you, though, Dak was one of the best passers in regards to what is it called, like adjusted completion percentage, and all those advanced stats, guys. Just go look at them. If you don't believe it, then you just gonna believe what you want to believe, man. I mean, at this point,
well, that's going to be the case anyway.
Yes, indeed.
No one, and I can speak for me when I say, and everyone who follows me knows this. I'm not an apologist for any player, but I also don't throw blame where blame should not be thrown. So some of those throws Dak has to get better on.
Yeah, I mean,
but the ones that were in the vicinity of the receiver, at some point you got to look at the receiver and say, you get paid to make those catches. Every pass is not going to be perfect, but you collect a check to catch it. So catch it. And each receiver, to their credit, they will tell you, each receiver in Dallas that has some drop issues, they'll tell you, hey, that was on me. So nobody puts that on Dak. And the ones that, but except Dak. Dak puts it on himself. So he takes full accountability, even when it's not his accountability to take. Great leader. They should have paid him. And now it's going to cost more to keep.
Hey, Pat, here's their favorite thing, Pat. Oh, it's the eye test.
Oh, man.
We watch it. We watching the same thing, too. And so are the people that came up with. That's why we give you the advanced stats, because obviously you don't want to believe the eye test. So let me go dig into the advanced stats. Now you don't want to believe either.
Funny thing about the eye test, though. Funny thing about the eye test, and I've said this, more often than I care to have to say when it comes to the eye test. For those that are saying, oh, well, when you put numbers in front of him, when you put film in front of them, oh, well, he doesn't pass the eye test. I know what I saw. Okay. Biologically speaking, every human on earth doesn't have 20/20 vision, right? Some of us are blind. Okay. Some are blind, some require bifocals, some require trifocals, some only require contacts, some don't require anything at all. At the end of the day, why should I put everyone's eye test on the same level of credibility?
Oh, okay. I see where you're going.
What I'm looking at is, if you tell me that he doesn't pass your eye test, my immediate question to you is, what have you seen or not seen that causes you to either praise or not praise some things that you're doing? Much too often, the response is simply to repeat what they just said to me. Oh, well, it's because
he's 2-6 against winning teams.
It's just 8-8. Okay, well, listen. There are those that are really good at the eye test, and they have the eagle eye for it. But if you're Mr. Magoo with it, like you really got to just stay away from me trying to assess football, because at the end of the day, what I find is people who say, a player of any of sort is not passing the eye test, or they are passing the eye test, is they're regurgitating takes that they've seen on one of the glowing devices in their home. And I'm not going to name any names as far as sports shows and radio hosts and things like that, but there's a lot of people that I could skip over in this conversation, but at the end of at the end of the day, you are two things when it comes to life in general, but also when it comes to assessing football. You are the homework you put in or don't put in, and you're also the data and takes that you consume, right? So if you only consume erroneous takes, hot takes, unsubstantiated takes, there's a greater likelihood that you're not going to know what the hell you're talking about.
Right.
And those of us that do know what the hell we're talking about, we're going to point out that you don't know what the hell you're talking about, but then you're going to get upset, right? And then you're going to, want to block us, right? But at the end of the day, when it comes to
disagreement,
when it comes to football, man, for me, it's science. It is what it is, and it ain't what it ain't. I'm going to tell you what I see, and you don't even have to agree with me. That's the fun thing about football, right? James and I, for example, don't agree with everything when it comes to the Cowboys. But even when we don't agree, I bet you we're not far off. And, there's not this cavernous rift between our 2 points. And it's probably because he sees it slightly more to the left and I see it slightly more to the right, but we're right there for the most part. When you start seeing these wild takes, oh, Dak Prescott isn't even worth $16 million a year. What are you talking about?
Blocked.
What are you talking about?
Yeah. No,
and then you ask them why, and they're well, he didn't pass the eye test. Okay, well, are your eyes open? Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Not everybody's looking through Oakley's. Some people are looking through the dollar store glasses.
Indeed,
yes,
man.
indeed.
A whole bunch of dollar tree.
They got their LASIK at at City Trends or so.
City Trends.
Hey Pat, I want to ask you
their LASIK. Yeah, their LASIK surgery came free with a purchase of a FUBU.
I already talked about that. Hey, I want to ask you a quick question about this COVID thing, Pat.
Right.
Because a lot of things are going on with a lot of people, have been asking me questions. I'm telling them I don't think that's going to happen. But it came out in the news how D-Law and Jalen Smith, a lot of players are saying hashtag we want to play. People are saying, oh, well, D-Law really going to sit out of this or this and this. I'm telling them that ain't going to happen. The players came with an agreement, do the multiple kind of daily testing. Kind of give us a background if you know anything about what's going on with the COVID. I've been kind of keeping people abreast with it, but kind of camp is getting ready to start. So are there any concerns about any players from the Cowboys opting out or anything like that have you have heard?
There are guys who are considering it. I'm not at liberty just yet to say who is considering it.
Okay.
But I will say that it's a situation that not only the Cowboys but all 32 NFL teams have to contend with over the next week or more with the potential opt-out. Now, we've seen DeMarcus Lawrence come out and speak against the lack of resolution from the NFL side as far as safety procedures, so forth and so on, agreeing with Russell Wilson, who has, a pregnant wife at home and just not wanting to risk bringing back an infection to their home. And that's something that players are considering, and they've long been considering. Like, this isn't new. That's just something DeMarcus Lawrence put it out there and have people now wondering if he'll do it. But I'm told he's one of several players that have been considering it for weeks now. And that's just within the Cowboys organization. I mean, there are dozens of players across the league who are considering it. So it'll be interesting once they finalize the opt-out date to see what teams lose what players due to the opt-out. But for those, I know I had someone who jumped in my mentions and said, oh, well, no one in the league is going to opt out because they all want their paycheck. And my response was, you're about to be proven wrong, because there are some guys who actually do value the health of their families over a coming paycheck. And if you're someone like Russell Wilson, just as an example, who has a pregnant wife at home plus kids, it gets heavy. So again, had these conversations, and yes, several Cowboys have taken into consideration the potential of opting out for the 2020 season. DeMarcus Lawrence obviously being one. But as we have this conversation right now, my gut tells me that the key players for the Cowboys are present and accounted for when training camp starts. Now, of course,
yeah, Patrick, I was going to ask you this, though. We see a trend with this. We see players that get paid or got paid or what have you are talking about, hey, I need to particularly look at my family and my loved ones. But those who like fresh, the rookies, and those who were like probably 1 year into it and never got their big paycheck, they going out there. They saying, okay, right, I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and just put all of my things on the line to go play. So is there an opportunity for those who don't have those big mega contracts to say, okay, this is a chance for me to prove that I'm capable of putting out some display of good tape?
It absolutely is. But the thing that's working against those individuals is, first, they have to make the final roster. And now we're talking about a situation with COVID that's, I think earlier today, it was agreed upon, and I'll have to double check that the roster count or the tally would be dropped from 90 to 80. I think that's what the NFLPA was agreeing on. We'll double check that later. But you have you're going into camp with a smaller number of players. So, I mean, there are rookies right now in the team hotel who are going to get a call in the next day or so, and they're going to be cut, right? You have bubble guys who rely heavily on the preseason to establish themselves as either practice squad guys or guys that deserve to be that 52nd, 53rd guy, and now going into 2020, 54th, 55th guy with the expansion of the rosters. But they're not going to have those opportunities. So yeah, ideally you would like to believe that, well, if you have a starter or a second level guy, opt out, then yeah, you're going to have the opportunity for some of these fringe guys to kind of jump in and show themselves. But if that guy opts out and now these fringe guys only have training camp practice to show themselves, and also keep in mind, this isn't a traditional training camp practice, right? It's going to be structured in such a way where it's going to be minimal contact for much of training camp. So by the time they actually can put on the pads, you're going to be talking about third week in August, maybe, possibly even the fourth week in August, depending on what the two sides agree on as far as the ramp up, the acclimation period that they're working on. So you're talking about injuries. You're talking about guys not having the opportunities to step out there. I think the Cowboys are going to be very veteran heavy when it comes to the roster. They're not going to take a lot of the risks that they probably would have taken under normal circumstances. And that it really puts a guy like McCarthy behind the 8 ball, because here's a guy who came in, new coach. You bring in a new defensive coordinator, you bring in a new defensive line coach, you bring in a new special teams coordinator. You do this sweeping change. You go and get big body personnel, Gerald McCoy, and you go and get Dontari Poe, and you bring in a guy who might have a resurgent year in Clinton Dix. You land CD Lamb, which was a BPA. That's something that Jason Garrett and that era would have never done, right? No. You go and you load up on all of this. You take a risk on Aldon Smith. That pays off so far because he's been reinstated. The expectation is Randy Gregory will be back, but that's still pending. It seems like that's a bureaucratic holdup, which is what I'm being told, but we'll see how that goes. But the expectation is he'll be back. But the team was supposed to be able to start their offseason program April 6th, which would have been 2 weeks prior to everyone else because they have a new coaching staff. Well, now here we are having this conversation on July 21st, and McCarthy and his coaching staff still haven't met their players face to face. So even the coaching staff in Dallas is behind the 8 ball. So you're talking about fringe guys who aren't going to be able to put a lot on film. They're up against it. The coaching staff, they're up against it. So it's going to be potentially a rough start for the Cowboys and other teams as well, but a whole lot of competitive disadvantage. So again, I don't feel at the time that we have this conversation that there will be any cornerstone players for the Cowboys that opt out. Looks like there's been some progress as recent as today with the safety protocols that might end up appeasing a guy like DeMarcus Lawrence. But veterans are supposed to report the 28th. Rookies are already trying to report. They're already undergoing COVID testing and could report as soon as Saturday. So there's not a lot of time to get everything hammered out and appease these players, who went out there and said, hashtag we want to play. They do want to play. And I get the point where, it can be viewed as, where these big money guys are the ones saying, well, if you don't get this together, we're not going to play. The Russell Wilsons, the Malcolm Jenkins of the world, the DeMarcus Lawrences, the J.J. Watts. But my counterpoint to that is, would you care if an undrafted free agent said it?
No.
Nope.
Would you care if the 70th guy on the roster came out and said, well, if you don't get the safety protocol together, we're not going to play? Nobody's going to care. Fans aren't going to care. It's not going to move the needle for the NFL when it comes to applying pressure to the league's front office. It's going to take these all pros coming out. And I think that's why you're seeing these guys with the big money contracts. It's not because necessarily, let's be realistic. I think it does play into it to a degree. But for the most part, it's because their names carry weight. And that's what the NFLPA needs at this moment is to swing wrecking balls, right?
No, that's why there are no preseason.
Nobody cares. Look, if Nelson Aguilar said hashtag we want to play, who cares?
But
if Russell Wilson says it, if Russell Wilson says it, everybody's like, holy crap. Drew Brees says it. They're like, we can't let Drew Brees not be on the field. We got, so I don't think it's more financial driven. I think it's, wrecking balls.
But it's just one of those things, whereas this virus, you can catch it if you're working at Walmart, if you're stocking stuff at FedEx or what have you, or UPS. So some of those guys on the lower end is looking at it like, yes, the NFLPA need those bigger boys to say this, but I'm trying my best to get out there to make $3-4 million. They can change. Man, it's generational money right here.
Yeah, and those are the same guys that want a preseason.
Right.
So you have some of these bigger guys like Tyrann Mathieu, and he's elated that there's not going to be a preseason. Some of these veterans who have already gotten, they're locked into their roster spot. right? So if you're locked into your roster spot, the preseason for you is A, a waste of time, and B, an opportunity to become injured. Hi, Tony Romo.
Right.
Some of these, the rookies reported today, I believe, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, they started getting
they
tested.
started tested.
They're testing. And, a lot of those rookies are just not going to come close to making this team without preseason, in my opinion, because sometimes we get a chance to see a Luke Gifford, right, who shows out and shows promise. Granted, he went on IR, but he showed enough promise that I think he might have made that team. So we got the rookies.
A guy like Donovan Wilson.
Sixth-round pick, showed out.
Had a great preseason, right? Now, of course, they wouldn't let him take the next step during the season, but entering another year, a second year for him, you would like that guy to have another preseason, especially under a new coaching regime, to potentially show himself worthy of being in the safety rotation. So just instances like that.
Who do you think, out of this rookie class doesn't really, I won't say doesn't need preseason, because all those rookies need preseason.
All of them need it.
Without preseason, who do you think can come in here and make an impact a little bit or a lot of it? Is it just CD?
No, you asked in the singular.
Yeah. Of the class.
You asked in the singular. Right. You didn't say plural, right? You said which of the rookies. Yeah. So I took that as singular. Okay, so I think CeeDee Lamb can come in and make an impact immediately. I think he's quite refined. I think he still obviously needs a little bit of polish, but that makes sense because this is going to be his first year in the NFL. But I think he'll learn well under a player like Amari Cooper, and under a guy like Kellen Moore, Mike McCarthy. So I think CeeDee Lamb is going to instantly make an impact. I think Trevon Diggs, hashtag Hive.
You had him in the first round.
I had him projected to the Cowboys in the first, and the Cowboys had him as a first round value on their board. But he got pushed. It would have come down if CeeDee Lamb didn't fall. It was coming down to Trevon Diggs and K'Lavon Chaisson. So if it wasn't Lamb, it was going to be Chaisson or Diggs, and they were still volleyballing between the two. But as Lamb started to fall more and more, they were like, "Whoa, this might happen." So when he was still there, they were like, "Okay, well, this is happening." And then Chaisson went elsewhere, and then they were able to double back and still were able to get Diggs. I think Diggs in a scheme where if this safety unit improves, now that could be by way of Clinton Dix having a prime year as he reunites with McCarthy. That could be that plus the fact that Xavier Woods is going into a contract year. That could be Chidobe Awuzie moving to safety and playing better facing forward because he struggled last year with turning around and seeing the ball. But if you play him front forward, as he did sometimes at Colorado State, then you might see that. Reggie Robinson can flex. Daryl Worley can flex. I mean, you have
Wilson. You got to put my
Donovan,
dog in there.
Donovan Wilson. I mentioned him a few moments ago because I got a lot of love for Wilson. I think he has a very high ceiling. But if the safety play improves for the Cowboys, that's your third level that shores up. By all intents and purposes, at least on paper, the defensive four look fantastic, right? Your linebackers, you got LVE coming back healthy. Jalen Smith might, get back to Jalen Smith form. Sean Lee is coming off of one of the best years you've seen Sean Lee have. Now the question is, well, how does Trevon Diggs fit into all of this? Trevon Diggs he's not the cornerback that's going to be effective at chasing down speedy receivers on streak routes outside the hashes. What he is, though, is super physical at the point of attack. He disrupts routes better than most, if not all, of the cornerbacks in his class. He's lethal when it comes to defending the slant route, the fade route. So he's going to be a guy that the Cowboys are going to love in the red zone. So yes, he has big shoes to fill when it comes to succeeding Byron Jones. But Byron Jones was tasked with doing so much more because it was poor safety play, right? So he wasn't allowed to jump routes like he maybe should have. Right, which is why he didn't have interceptions.
Right.
He was taxed to, shut down half the field because they were struggling with Chidobe Awuzie at times, et cetera, et cetera. If they get things figured out opposite Trevon Diggs, and if the safety core is shored up like we think it can be, and if the pass rush is shored up like we believe it has been, all Trevon Diggs has to do is what he did in college, which is be that 5 to 25 yard defender And in that capacity, he can be a shutdown corner right out the bat, right off the bat. So I believe Trayvon Diggs and CeeDee Lamb, they're going to do numbers. I think Neville Gallimore in rotation with Dontari Poe, learning from Poe. I think Antoine Woods is the odd man out right now, to be honest, because Gallimore is, I call Gallimore the Doberman. You guys have seen me because he's a Doberman, right? And not to say Antoine Woods isn't, but from what I'm told Antoine Woods isn't in a good space mentally when it comes to the Cowboys right now. And it's because they went out and got Poe, and then they doubled back and got Gallimore. So those are your two nose tackles right there.
And he drafted Tristan last year.
Is that why he's still unsigned, Pat?
As it stands, his contract status is kind of in the air because on one note, which is why I haven't spoken about it on Twitter or in any particular write-up, is because one source tells me that they're close to him signing. Now, keep in mind, he's an exclusive rights free agent, so he can't play for anybody else. Right. He either plays for the Cowboys or he doesn't play in 2020. That's the bottom line. Wow. But from an Antoine Wood standpoint, he feels slighted a bit because he feels like he came in 2018 and he was fantastic. But he battled some injuries and in 2019 and things didn't go his way. So now what does Mike McCarthy do? He brings in Dontari Poe. He goes and gets Neville Gallimore, right? Those are your two nose tackles for the most part, as far as 1 and 2. So where does Antoine Woods fit? So the best I will put it when it comes to Woods is, as it stands, I don't believe that he's put pen to paper just yet. The Cowboys have the offer in front of him, which is a very straightforward and simple offer because he's an ERFA. So either you sign it or you don't sign it. It's no negotiation here. Right. But in the event you don't sign it, guess what? We got two guys that are ready to go. So I think Neville Gallimore can make an instant impact. But oh man, Bradley Anae.
Hey, there it is. The Annihilator.
Bradley Anae.
The Annihilator.
I know a lot of football fans more so pay attention to the power conferences, right? So there's not a lot of people watching Utah football. Okay.
They should.
They should, especially as of late.
Yes.
But if you have seen Anae and film on him and just him in action in live games, that dude is something special. And I had a lot of people ask, well, if he was so special, why'd he fall to the 5th round? Because people stare too hard at the 40.
Yeah.
People stare too hard at the 40-yard dash.
Yeah, he's slow. He looks slow, so slow.
He looks slow. He doesn't play slow.
Well, I'll say this about I will say it about his speed does show up when he has to chase. But as a pure pass rusher, I think he is one of the more refined ones coming into that draft.
Absolutely. He was
a short area quickness.
Arguably one of the biggest steals of the draft of any team. And he just so happens to be on the
top 5 steal in the draft.
Yeah. So keep an eye on Anae. I think Anae comes in and he does some damage. I think his will be a bit curbed by virtue of Alden Smith being there. Tyrone Crawford's coming back. If they get Randy Gregory back as expected. So you have these veteran guys who are proven pass rushers that are going to kind of curb what Anae can do. But I think that the Cowboys are considering putting Anae behind DeMarcus Lawrence. Let him rush off of the left, especially in those 3-man sets when they switch to 3-4, because they'll kind of play a hybrid system. It'll be 4-3 base, but you'll see them switch to 3-4 and then back to 4-3. But in situations like that, especially in the 3-4, when you got you want to utilize Anae more as an outside linebacker than as a 5-tech, then I think you're going to see Anae really come in and spell DeMarcus Lawrence and do some good work off of that left edge. So Cowboys, as it stands, have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to their rookie class. You look
so much value.
I'm telling you, you look at who they were able to get.
I
we ain't even talking
I'll
about.
go as far. I'll go as far. Biadasz, right? A Wisconsin guy who's cut in the same mold as Travis Frederick. I'm not going to jump out there and say he's the next Travis Frederick because that's a tall ask to put on a kid. But hey, another Wisconsin legend like Travis Frederick. He studied and models his game after Travis Frederick. And just because Travis Frederick is retired, don't think that he's not going to be at the facility. Don't think that he's not going to be, helping out and putting in some time, helping bring guys like Biadasz up. I think that Joe Looney ends up being the starter at the beginning of the season, but Biadasz can absolutely beat him out as the Frederick successor before the season concludes. So Beatis is another steal. They moved up to get him because they knew that, hey, he's still on the board. Oh my God, right? And his collegiate pedigree speaks for itself. So you look at a guy like CeeDee Lamb, Trevon Diggs, Neville Gallimore, Bradley Anai, Tyler Beatis, and hell, we can even have a little bit of fun and say that there's no guarantee that Dalton beats out Ben DiNucci.
Ben DiNucci's moxie, man. That
guy's got some swagger.
Makes me attached to him. Yes, he does. Now I think
swagger on 1,000
going to beat him out,
and he can scramble and he glides.
I think Dalton might beat him out by virtue of him being a veteran. And guess what? We were talking about no preseason games, right?
Right.
There's no preseason and a very minimized training camp as far as being able to go full bore. With practices and padded practices. So by virtue of all of that, McCarthy's not going to get a chance to really see the upside of DiNucci, but I think they'll see enough of it wherein DiNucci will make the practice squad. But I think that if there was a full training camp and there was a full preseason, I mean, what are you paying Andy Dalton? $2 million? You're not going to tell me that a $2 million guy is bulletproof.
I think they'll want to go with that veteran, though, in my opinion.
I just think with the virus, you got to roll with 3.
I mean, you're going to roll with them now because you're not really having a training camp for the most part. You're definitely not having a preseason. So you're not going back to what I said earlier in the cast is that you're not going to take the risks that you probably would have taken in a normal situation. This is a COVID-19 world, wherein we'll be blessed if we have any football whatsoever. So knowing that, coaches are not going to, be so apt to roll the dice on, a 7th round pick or an undrafted free agent. I think that a guy like Rondell Carter.
That's who I was about to ask. You was in my brain. You interviewed me. We're never too far away. Ask you about. That's who I want to ask you about because all the undrafted free agents out there, you had him on your show. You interviewed him. After you interviewed him, I went and watched his tape. And I was like, oh my gosh, this kid is good. So do you think, because it's a big thing, they're talking about reducing the rosters from the players from 90 to 80. Do you think a guy like him with that talent that he has, and it's going to be hard for the undrafted free agents to really see the light of day on the field, do you think he can actually get on there? Or you think he'll go to the practice squad because they paid him a lot of money?
Rondell Carter has a chance to make this team as far as the active roster goes. I think what's going to be one of the deciding factors on if he makes the active roster versus if he goes to the practice squad is going to be Randy Gregory. I think if Randy Gregory is reinstated as expected, then there's a greater chance Carter ends up on practice squad because I can go ahead and tell you right now, the Cowboys don't want to lose him. They don't want him to go anywhere whatsoever.
Good money.
Right. So if they can figure out a way to squeeze him into that final active roster spot, they're going to do so. But it gets kind of difficult to do so if Gregory comes back as expected, because now guess what? You got on that right edge, you got Tyrone Crawford, who's going to do more work on the right edge than at 3-tech. So just so people know, the Cowboys are already planning that. So you got Alden Smith, you got Tyrone Crawford, you're going to have Randy Gregory. We were talking about Anai, right? Anai is a bit more polished as a pass rusher than Carter. Carter is still an animal as the pass rusher, but he also does work on the defensive interior. So he's a good penetrator from the interior as well. So his flexibility is going to give him that added oomph that the Cowboys are going to want to see. But I don't see any scenario of all the undrafted free agents that the Cowboys have, and they did well with that pool as well. I mean, they really just killed April when it came.
Well, let me say this right quick though. We can't leave out Joe Jackson and DA.
Oh no, we're not going to do that. In my roster projection, when did I do my roster projection? It was May, June. I can't remember. It was either May or June. It was my way too early roster projection. I have Joe Jackson there. I have Durance Armstrong there, and I squeezed Rondell Carter into my final defensive line spot. So for me, he's good enough to be on this team. But my asterisk to that was Randy Gregory. Randy Gregory's coming back. I don't think you push out a guy like Joe Jackson or Durance Armstrong to get Carter on the active roster in a season that lacks a preseason,
right,
and a greatly altered training camp. I think you go with a guy like Joe Jackson, who was here last year, who already has some NFL experience. Durance Armstrong is entering his 3rd year, I believe. So you go with the guys who've been there, done that, for lack of a better way to put it, and you put a guy like Carter on the practice squad if Gregory is back, and then you develop him from there, because it's football. Inevitably, there's going to be an injury on the defensive line. You want to be able to call up Carter instantly. What you don't want to do is risk him to waivers in any way, shape, or form if you can help it.
Please don't lose him.
So
don't lose him.
Carter,
Patrick,
I think Carter is still
you're putting it out there as much as possible, but as much information you can give us without, giving away the information. What is the storyline with this Randy Gregory piece? What is going on? Why is he not reinstated? Why we see Alden Smith reinstated? Why do we see other people get reinstated? But what's the storyline with Randy?
Okay. Difference between Alden Smith and Randy Gregory. First of all, Alden Smith put in his paperwork first.
Okay.
So, he was inevitably probably going to get reinstated first, or get his verdict first. But also look at the timing of it all. Alden Smith, we're talking about COVID, right? Alden Smith put in his paperwork and essentially got his decision truly before the pandemic exploded in its first wave. Okay. Randy Gregory submitted his paperwork, I want to say a month later, if that. But by that time, coronavirus, was spiking for the first go round. NFL is at that point, trying to figure out and have conversations with the NFLPA. Are we going to have a virtual off season? Is it going to be a traditional in-person off season? What about mini camp? What about training camp? So now the persons who are tasked with handling these cases, Alden Smith and Randy Gregory or Josh Gordon, for example, they're now doing double duty, because they're also helping the league front office try to, get everything copacetic with the NFLPA, so that, at that point, so minicamp can happen. But guess what it did? So now training camp can happen. So it was described to me that the delay in a decision on Randy Gregory is bureaucratic more than it is indicative of any potential negative verdict coming his way. So let me put it in layman's terms. There's so much going on with the league front office right now that it's holding up what should have been a fairly easy decision when it comes to Randy Gregory. And it's simply because his case, for lack of a better way to describe it, is passing through so many hands, and those hands are multitasking, and they're just being asked to do so much right now. And I've asked again, and every time I ask, which is probably once a week at this point, it always comes back to me that it doesn't look bad or good. It's simply Cowboys are waiting. Now, saw a report recently that the Cowboys had all but lost hope. That's not what I'm getting. What I'm getting is that the Cowboys still very much have hope, and they're being patient. They have an expectation that he will be back. Now, obviously, when it comes to Roger Goodell, he can do whatever he wants. You can have an expectation all day long, but the commissioner will do what the commissioner wants to do. But evidence to support what my sources are telling me lie in the fact that the Cowboys are trying to have backdoor conversations with the league to see if there's any way Gregory can be involved with the team during training camp while they try to figure out what the verdict is going to be. To me, that doesn't sound like a team that's given up hope on a guy possibly returning in 2020. To me, it tells me that the team is trying to get him reacclimated to the process in the hopes and expectations that he will in fact be back. So Alden Smith applied first. He more or less beat the coronavirus wave, the first wave. Randy Gregory applied a little bit, during that first surge, but now guess what? Now we're in the second surge, right? So Gregory and I'm told Gregory is not the only matter that the NFL front office is delayed in handling, because they're doing so much to try to iron out things with the NFLPA. So I think once things start to get solidified there and players start to report to training camp and that storm passes, then the NFL can get back to saying, okay, now what did we put a pin in? Let's get these matters handled. And Randy Gregory is one of those matters.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're basically saying the NFL is done being busy with NFL stuff during this COVID.
Don't worry about y'all later.
It's very possible and likely that Randy Gregory will be on this roster.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Now, of course, I can't guarantee what Roger Goodell will or will not do, but all conversations I've had, And in speaking with Gregory himself, I've had a couple conversations with Gregory himself, and he's in great spirits. He still remains hopeful. He's not had any setbacks whatsoever. He's excited. He looks like a kid in a candy store for the most part. He's ready to get back to the field and play ball. And for those that would give up on Randy Gregory, I say this: he's never had an off the field issue that didn't relate to a drug that the NFL, for the most part, no longer cares about. Right?
I heard you.
He's never been arrested. He's never had a domestic violence issue. He's never had a DUI. He's never had any type of criminal charge or anything like that. He uses marijuana to self-medicate because of his, clinical anxiety, bipolar depression. And the Cowboys have stood by him, and they're going to continue to stand by him. And, reports that they've given up hope are false. They have not given up hope. If anything, they're trying to figure out how to get him reacclimated in the hopes that Roger Goodell makes the decision they expect him to make.
Yeah, I heard you earlier mention, and this kind of made me raise my antennas, that they are.
What was your antennas?
Yeah, so you got it. They are they're prepping Tyrone Crawford to play more right defensive end than 3-tech. And to me, so if that's the case, why not go out and look for an upgrade in a guy like Everson Griffin? And if we say, okay, Cap, well, if you get rid of Crawford's $8 million you'll save, you can use that towards an Everson Griffin, who I think anybody would believe is a better player. Maybe he's not a locker room leader like Crawford is, but is that really the reason why we're keeping Crawford? Because he's a locker room leader? I mean, I know you need him, but I mean,
it's not the reason, but it's a reason. Tyrone Crawford is easily one of the more underrated players.
No disrespect to him, but
yeah, he's easily one of the more underrated players for the Cowboys. Yes, he's coming off of hip surgery, and that's not promising, but he looks great thus far. He looks healthy, sounds healthy. Cowboys are looking to put a bigger workload on him. Like you said, they're looking to potentially give him more snaps on the right edge. But yeah, I get it. People don't like the $8 million salary cap hit, et cetera, et cetera. But this is a guy when the Cowboys needed sacks and they, had a hard time getting it from players like DeMarcus Lawrence, guess who was getting you 5.5, 6 sacks? It was Tyrone Crawford. When you asked Tyrone Crawford to move to the right edge, guess what he did? He lost weight so he could move to the right edge. And then guess what? You asked him to move back to the 3-tech, and he gained weight to move back to the 3-tech. And you asked him to do one of those two things again, and he dropped weight, gained weight, dropped weight, gained. He's done everything the Cowboys have asked him to do and produced in doing so. Prior to him battling injury in 2019, he was also one of the more durable players on the Cowboys, rarely missed a game at all prior to 2019. Now you also add to that the locker room factor. He is one of, if not the de facto leader in the locker room when it comes to the defensive side of the ball, him and Sean Lee. You saw what happened when the Cowboys started to go on that slide in 2019 and Tyrone Crawford wasn't around. One of the main things they missed about Crawford wasn't simply the production, the 5 sacks, the 6 sacks, which you just can't get, right, in a guy coming in off the street, right? You got to give credit to a guy getting 5 or 6 sacks in the NFL on a consistent basis. But he's also one of the fires that gets guys going in the locker room. Now, Everson Griffin. When Everson Griffin first came available, I did report that the Cowboys had interest in him, and the Cowboys still have interest in Everson Griffin. Here's the difference, though. Here's the difference between then and now. They wanted to see what they could get in the NFL draft before they went out and paid a guy like Everson Griffin. Their thought process was, we can probably add Griffin to a rotation that has Tyrone Crawford in it.
What?
Now you go you go into the draft. I mean, does it hurt to have as many talented?
No.
Well, here's why
that money, though.
Here's why I say
that. Money, not even money. Just he better. But go ahead.
I'm also told that Everson Griffin wasn't. He wasn't exactly
$11 million.
Everson Griffin wasn't trying to break the bank. Right. I think it was just his split with the Vikings was simply that they didn't. He felt disrespected to a degree. Right. It's not that Everson Griffin was trying to break the bank and remaining with the Vikings, whatever the case may be. He just felt that they were undervaluing what he brings to the table. Now, the Cowboys, earlier in the offseason, when they thought they would have Dak on a long-term deal, which would ideally lead to a lower cap hit, right? There was no scenario in March that led the Cowboys to believe that on July 21st, they'd only have approximately $8 million in cap space. Okay. So they had interest in Everson Griffin, and they were, potentially going to reach out to him if the draft didn't fall in their favor on the defensive line. But it did. You got Neville Gallimore, you got Bradley Anaya, you went and rolled the dice on Alden Smith, and it paid off in him being reinstated. Tyrone Crawford looks healthy. So in no scenario did they look at moving on from Crawford. Hell, I was told initially, late last season, I was told by a source that they were going to approach him with a conversation of potentially lowering his pay. Okay, well, here comes April, and I'm told that not only did they not do that, but they were no longer interested in trying to reduce his pay, which tells me that they're looking to get more out of him in 2020, not less, not trying to move him out. Yeah, they're not trying to move him out. They're not trying to, give him a reduction in play or anything like that. Now, when it comes to Everson Griffin, do the Cowboys still have interest? Yes, they do, but it's not as grandiose as it was in March before the draft fell in their favor, before Alden Smith was put on the roster, so forth and so on, before they ended up not extending Dak and only have $8 million in salary cap space. Now they're in a situation where I think that the only way you will see Everson Griffin in Dallas is an injury in training camp. There's no preseason for anyone to be injured in, but you still have training camp the month of August. So if you see an injury in August or early September, they're going to pick that phone if Everson Griffin is still available, because the Cowboys aren't the only team in the league. So I'm told that there are other teams monitoring Everson Griffin's status as well. So if an injury comes up, yeah, it's a strange offseason for free agents, period.
Snacks, Griffin,
Snacks,
Clowney,
Griffin. Not
Logan.
being able to Clowney is a whole different talk. Clowney and Griffin are not in the same bowl of soup.
Even worse.
And I'm not talking about talent wise. I'm talking about how they're approaching free agency. Clowney, which is the reason the Cowboys, and I reported this as well from day one, the Cowboys were out on Jadeveon Clowney, and it's because Jadeveon Clowney was seeking an average of $20 million a year. He came down a bit to $18 million a year. The Browns offered him 17. He waived that off. The Titans didn't make him a formal offer, but the Titans themselves have come out and said, Vrabel came out and said that, not Vrabel, but the GM with the Titans came out and said recently that they would love to have Clowney there, but they're not going to have any type of conversation with him until they get him in the building and can do a physical, right? So you got free agency during COVID times where players aren't allowed to visit facilities and get physicals, and yet you have a guy like Clowney who's coming off of a year where he battled some injury. Teams want to get a look at him. But before they can get a look at him, he's like, well, no, I'm not even coming in if you're not going to give me $20 million a year. So the Cowboys don't play that game. I mean, they had a hard enough time trying to get their quarterback extended. They're not going to go out and drop $20 million on a guy, and you already paid Tank. You got Alden Smith, who you might end up getting 10 sacks for pennies on the dollar.
That's the wild card right there, man.
That is the wild card. But I mean, you could potentially end up getting the situation if Alden Smith gets back to prime. He's going to be one of the best pass rushers in the league, because he was when he was in his prime. That's not hyperbolic. That's not a reach. When Alden Smith was in his prime, he was elite. He was elite, one of the best pass rushers. So my statement again is, if Alden Smith returns to prime form, he will again be one of the best pass rushers, but on a minimal 80%. Contract. On a minimal contract. So you have these things working out. We talk about Anaya, we talk about Gallimore, we talk about Tank being on the field, talk about the linebacker core being healthy, et cetera, et cetera. What's driving you to bring in Jadeveon Clowney at $18, $19, $20 million?
Oh, none. Not at that.
Nothing. Nothing. Now, Everson Griffin, that's a different story. Yeah. But now the problem is, again, not only did the draft fall in their favor, but they just don't have the cap space for an Everson Griffin right now. They just don't. So
he can make it, but they don't want to
cut Crawford, because
no, they want Crawford. You said it.
Yeah, I'm saying you're gutting the locker room to bring in a guy in Everson Griffin who might get you 1.5 to 2 more sacks. Now that's not necessarily anything to shake a stick at, right? But the question, if you're Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones, is: are you willing to cut a ventricle out of the heart of the locker room
I hear that,
for 1.5 more sacks? And if I'm Jerry and Stephen, my answer is no, because what I can do is look down the line, down the defensive line, and demand someone else that I'm already paying get me 1.5 more sacks. So 3 guys get me half a sack, right? 4 guys get me half a sack. There's the 2 sack difference. So yeah, they love to have Everson Griffin, but not at the expense of Tyrone Crawford.
that is the best answer I've heard in regards to the Tyron Crawford thing. I still don't want him, but that's the best answer that I've heard this whole offseason.
I mean, it might be the difference between 6 sacks and 8 sacks, right? If I can get 6 sacks from a guy and see that he, light a fire under the ass of my defense on a weekly basis, every day in practice, versus bringing in a guy who might get me 2 more sacks, and he's great on the field, but he's new to the locker room, he's learning the culture. You got all of that with Crawford. So instead of asking, for those additional 2 sacks from Crawford, maybe you get it. But
my
if
concern, though, those hips, man. That's tough for a guy who's about 31, 32?
Yeah, he's on that.
It's not going to get better. He tried to come back from it, and he went back out. And like, again, I'm not knocking like you said, man. He did everything they asked him to do, and he wasn't bad at anything. He was always a very serviceable and sometimes really good player. I just think Griffin's better. However, if he is healthy, he can do a little bit more because he can go up and down the line. Exactly. Because I don't know if we can get that Griffin, but pure right in, he's a beast.
And also keep in mind, and you make a valid point, hips are hard to come back from. But if you're looking at a situation where let's say Randy Gregory comes back as expected, you're going to see Crawford get more work on the right edge, but does that necessarily mean he's going to see an increased snap count, or are we talking about the share of his snap count going more towards the right edge than the 3-tech? I think we're talking about more the latter. I think Aldon Smith is going to be, by the time camp is over, I think Aldon Smith is your starting right in, right? So if he's your starting right in, barring
all things are equal, yes.
Yeah, all things being equal, I think Aldon Smith is going to be your starting right in. Can Crawford beat him out in practice? Yeah, absolutely. He's got the leg up, right? He's the incumbent for the most part. But if you throw Randy Gregory in that mix, now on the right end, you have 3 guys who can really get after the passer. So you really don't have to lean so heavily on any one or any 2 of them. So you might look at a situation where Tyron Crawford, although asked to do more duty on the right end than at 3-tech, all in all, he might see a slight reduction in his snap count, maybe 3 or 4 snaps fewer per game. Mm-hmm. And for a guy that's coming off of a hip injury, that doesn't sound too shabby, right? And
treat him like Sean Lee then.
Right. You see what you're going to get from him over the first quarter of the season, first half of the season. And if his hips are holding up like you hope they are, then you start increasing his snap count more, so forth and so on. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But I would love to see him with Thompson. I absolutely would. I mean, he did well under Marinelli. He did well under Marinelli. And Marinelli, give credit to Marinelli, not the best play caller, but he's an excellent defensive line coach. I would argue that Thompson is better at coaching the defensive line than Marinelli. So if Tyron Crawford can get you 5.5, 6 sacks under Marinelli, who's to say he can't get 7.5, maybe even 8 under Jim Thompson? So I'll be interested to see how it all shakes out. I wouldn't cut out Tyron Crawford to bring in Griffin. If you could get Griffin and add him to the mix, absolutely. But I'm not going to cut out the heart of my defensive locker room for 2 more sacks. Instead, I'll look at the other guys and say, hey, DeMarcus, can you get me 1 more? Hey, Alden, can you get me half? Hey, Gerald, right? McCoy, he looks to be in fantastic shape, right?
He'd be getting 5 a year.
You're right. If McCoy is in better shape than he has been when he was getting 5, 6 per year, there's another 3 sacks right there. If he goes up to 8, it all works out. So,
my man, absolutely right. Hey, you guys have any other questions for him, Law Nation, Big Game James?
Nah, you was spitting science like you always do. You know what I'm saying? You would go hammer with the science. I was just in science class. I didn't get good grades.
What I said, I always say this when I retweet you.
Today, I got 8.
Classes in session.
I got A's today, P. I got an A today.
Listen, you earning the scholarship.
I earned the scholarship.
Academic scholarship.
Back in high school, they said, "Oh boy, you ain't never passing."
For a few seconds here, are you open to answering some questions from the people in the chat right quick?
Fire away.
I got my girl over here, Natasha. She said she thought you had Method Man on the show. So do you get that anytime?
I don't, but I tell you what,
he gonna roll with it.
I'm not gonna be mad at any comparison between myself and the Italian Stallion.
Hey.
So if you look at me and you see METHOD, man, I'm not gonna be mad at it. So hey, I'll take that as a compliment. The Method Man is a legend. So any comparison to him is a good thing.
Toby over on Facebook said, "Who do you see as the left guard and the center?"
Oh, left guard right now at the moment we have this conversation, I'm going with Connor Williams. Here's how I think it's going to shake out in training camp. The Cowboys are going to give Connor Williams and Connor McGovern some snaps at center to see what they have there. Keep in mind, Connor McGovern logged some, I think, several starts. As a matter of fact, I know he logged several starts with Penn State at center. So Connor McGovern has some center ability, but he was redshirted last year. So they need to know what they're going to get from him on the NFL level. Connor Williams coming off of the injury, but before Connor Williams was injured in December, you saw that he beefed himself up. He got more strength, which was a big knock against him as a rookie. So he gained more strength, he gained muscle, and he really started to come on in year 2 at left guard. But they're going to want to see because he, when it comes to the center position, because nothing is figured out, they're going to test drive 4 guys. Tyler Biadasz, not necessarily Joe Looney. You know what you get with Joe Looney, right? Joe Looney is a proven starter. He proved it in 2018 when Travis Frederick went down with CBS the first go. But when it comes to Biadasz, McGovern, Williams, all 3 of those guys, in addition to Looney, are going to get some snaps at center in training camp. My prediction is that Joe Looney starts at center to begin the season. McGovern and or Biadasz have an opportunity to supplant him over the course of the season. At left guard, give me Connor Williams until further notice. So even though the Cowboys will get him some snaps at center in training camp, I don't think you can go away from him. You don't know yet what you're getting with McGovern, be it at center or at left guard. You know where Looney is stationed, center, and you know where Biadasz is stationed, center. So because you're not going to move Biadasz to the left, you're not going to move Looney to the left, even though you could move Looney to the left because he's a swing interior guy. You got to go with Looney as the starter. And I think that just leaves Connor Williams there. So for my 5 up front, of course, you got Terrence Smith on the left, Connor Williams, Joe Looney for starters. And then Biadasz, I think, will supplant him, Zach Martin, and then Lyle Collins.
I got one from my end, P. It's basically from Jim Laws. Actually, it's a 2-part question. Jim Laws and my guy, Reid. Jim Laws asks, I know you may have mentioned it, but I'm sorry if I forgot. He asked about Reggie Robinson, the 4th-round draft pick. What are your thoughts on him? And Reid asked, my question is, who do you think are going to be the 2 starting cornerbacks week 1?
Fantastic question. When it comes to Reggie Robinson, you're talking about a lengthy guy, very physical, who can flex between corner and safety. So it'll be interesting to see because the Cowboys made reference of Robinson's flexibility when they selected him. So I think that was a strong hint that he's not definitively going to be put at corner. They're going to test drive him at both positions. Free safety, I don't think he's a box safety kind of guy. He's a little too slinky or if you know what I mean there. Right. I don't think he has that base, that Barry Church in him to play that box safety. But I think they'll give him some snaps at free safety. They'll give him some snaps at outside corner. But he can also get the job done at nickel corner. And I know, and you guys know, when it comes to me, I'm Jordan Lewis Hive all day long. I think Anthony Brown does an excellent job, but I think for my money, you put Jordan Lewis at the nickel. But don't be surprised if Reggie Robinson gives a guy like Anthony Brown a little bit of a run for his money, as Anthony tries to give Jordan a run for his money at nickel. So you got 3 different positions that Reggie Robinson can potentially give you impact plays at. You got the nickel slot, you got the corner opposite Trevon Diggs, and potentially some snaps at free safety. Now, here's where it really gets interesting. The free agency signing of Daryl Worley, right? So Daryl Worley has also shown that he can take some snaps at safety as well. He has a similar flexibility as Reggie Robinson. So this all goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of the show, the defensive backfield. And I wrote this in the column today on the biggest NFC East battles. And for the Cowboys, for me, it's the defensive back position because Trevon Diggs is being tasked with being Byron Jones' successor. You know what you're going to get from Xavier Woods. Outside of that, everything else is a question mark. Will Clinton Dix have another resurgent year under Mike McCarthy? Where is Reggie Robinson going to play? Where is Daryl Worley going to play? What about a veteran like Savion Smith? You got Maurice Kennedy. Kennedy, I might be mispronouncing his last name, but you brought him in as well. So there's a lot in flux when it comes to that defensive backfield for the Cowboys. But for my money, in it's difficult. It's difficult.
To think.
It's tough. Let's do for a nickel set.
Yeah.
Nickel set. Give me Trevon Diggs on the right. Give me Jordan Lewis as the nickel slot. No preseason. I got to go with Worley.
Yep,
opposite
that's
Trayvon Diggs, because if we're talking about the likelihood that the Cowboys go more veteran heavy because they won't have a preseason for these rookies to really step up and show, I think they give Darryl Worley the nod in the first couple of games or so as the starter by virtue of him being the veteran. And they know what they can get from him at the NFL level. But don't be surprised if by the time October rolls around, if Robinson is the starter opposite Diggs. I just don't think that the Cowboys will be.
A lot of people have been saying that though.
But I just, all things being equal, if we were not in a pandemic and there was a full-blown training camp and there was a full-blown preseason, I think there'd be a better chance of that happening. But I don't think McCarthy and Nolan are going to be too comfortable right out the gate having two rookies as their starting corners on the outside. So I think you got to balance that. You know for a fact Trayvon Diggs is your starter. That's your second-round pick who had a first-round grade. I think to balance it out, opposite him, you go Darryl Worley. You put Jordan Lewis, who is proven finally, and I don't say proven finally, but he was finally allowed to prove himself as a starter at nickel slot. And then in the defensive third level, Xavier Woods. And to start, I'll take Clinton Dix. But I'll take Clinton Dix with an asterisk next to it because I want to see what Awuzie can do. I want to see what Donovan Wilson can do. But Wilson's going to be behind the 8 ball again because he doesn't get the preseason to show himself to Mike McCarthy. And Mike McCarthy knows what he has in Clinton Dix. So he's going to lean on Clinton Dix. And I would put money on the table. I think Clinton Dix is going to be the starting safety beside Xavier Woods going into the first game of the season. Everybody else is going to have to earn those snaps.
Yeah, one of the things that Brian Browder said when we had him on the show is that there's no sponsorships in the building no more. So finally we would see that, I guess, skills, steel sharpen steel, iron sharpen iron type of philosophy. One of the things that we saw from this coaching staff is that they are keen on height, just like the old regime, Chris Richard. So do you think
they mean it this time?
They mean it. So do you think that put J. Lou in the bubble in the sense that he got to outperform those tall guys?
Again, he said he had a clean slate.
Yeah, he got a clean slate, but he still got to go against the mindset that he's not tall enough.
I think he's up against that.
I don't think he cares about that.
I know he don't cares about it, but
no
sponsorship.
I love J. Lou's attitude. You know, I've had conversations with him, and I remember once, not so long ago, I asked him straight up. I said, "Hey, on or off the record, tell me your thoughts on this constant, narrative of you're not tall enough and that's why you can't get on the field, et cetera, et cetera." And he straight up told me, he said, "Pat, well, no, see." he said, "No, see, I can only control what I do on the field. I can't grow another inch." That goes to you guys' point. Jordan Lewis doesn't care about how tall or not tall he is. At the end of the day, he's a baller. He's a ball hawk, one of the few ball hawks the Cowboys have had on the defense. And I think that's going to play well for him out the gate for a guy like Mike Nolan, who is very vocal about demanding takeaways. So, you have a guy like Nolan who, and Harris, the defensive backs coach.
I love some Harris.
And they love length. Don't get me wrong, they do love length, but Nolan is so addicted to takeaways, which is great, that it's going to be hard for Nolan to simply overlook what Ludus can do as far as taking the ball away in both the air and on the ground, because he forces and recovers fumbles as well. It's hard to kind of shelve a guy like that because he's missing a half an inch when he cuts his hair. Right. So at the end of the day, I think Jordan Lewis still has a good chance of starting come the first game in September. But again, we'll kind of see how that goes. I do think it's a clean slate with a little bit of a tilt towards length, but he's proven he can take the ball away. And unlike Richard, so Richard was teaching coverage. Mike Nolan is teaching take the ball away.
And that's how his defense is designed. It's aggressive. But I think where Jordan Lewis is going to compete is in the slot. I think they're adamant and they're serious about having length on the outside, because a lot of us believe Jordan can play out there.
Oh, he's not getting out there.
But I don't think it's happening. When they bring in 5 dudes that is 6'1", fam, it ain't happening. So
he's not
your competition is going to be with Anthony Brown. And I think he can beat out Anthony Brown, but obviously they look at Anthony Brown as the future for right now. But can he play his way into a bigger contract in Dallas? We're going to find out.
We gonna see. We gonna see.
Surely see, man.
Any more out there, Law, James, in the comments?
No, sir. I'm good. I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on here, man. You know, you gave me every time me and Pat talked on the show ahead of time. He was like, "All right, man, we got like 30 minutes. We got 30 minutes. That's all we got 30 minutes." I'm like, "All right, dog. We're going to do 30. We're going to do 30 minutes."
James is over there. James is over there trying to make me seem like I'm Mariah Carey.
No. Just saying,
like I'm over here with the hair flipping and whatnot. Like,
no. Once we get to talking,
I have to structure things.
Yeah, I know. I got you.
Way, it's all. Yeah.
You know what? You know, we need to start bringing out. Remember on Dave Chappelle, wrap it up, B. Wrap it up, B. We need to start. So if y'all want to get up, you know what I'm saying? Wrap it up if y'all think we going too far. Yeah, but this is what it is. You know, Pat, you seen your man KD on the show. We can go.
Yeah. We can go. I know. And the thing about KD is he never shuts the hell up. So
please bring it back. I can't wait.
That's
for
my guy. Yeah, KD
podcast.
Drummond. That's my brother. And I can honestly say that I'm blessed to know that guy.
Y'all need to do y'all podcast again.
Didn't he drop that science?
He dropped it.
He said a little bit, but he ain't drop all the science.
Okay, well, I'm not going to completely tip the hand, but I'll reaffirm what he said, which is, I'll preface it with this. For those that are asking if I'm bringing back the Star Witness podcast, the answer is yes. The date is to be determined. I'm working out the details with CBS Sports on that because when I relaunch it, I want it to be the right way.
Right.
I don't half-ass. Either we going all the way or we not going at all. Now, while the pen is in that and that's getting worked out, KD and myself, we are relaunching the famed Catch This Fade podcast.
Yes. That's the one.
Catch This Fade.
That's that one. Catch that fade.
So I can get back to breaking my foot off in his ass. On a regular basis, and so that'll be soon. We had hang-ups, COVID. Thankfully, nothing as far as infection on his end, on my end. But as far as the NFL is concerned, and the COVID pandemic, and just hiccups in the NFL created hiccups in us getting it back up and running. But it is definitely coming, and it's coming before the season jumps off. So shouts out to KD Drummond. I'm sorry that you guys had to be subjected to his long-windedness by having him on. But now you know what I have to deal with when I'm on the air with him.
No, honestly, man, for me at least, when you guys come on here and we go, I love it. They love it. The chat is telling us to say thank you, man. Thank you for coming in.
Oh, I mean, you guys, I can't stress enough. And the thing about it is there are so many people delivering the information that you guys are delivering, that, guys like myself and Katie are delivering it, and, talented women like Jane Slater are delivering, and Amy Trask, and just so forth and so on. It sometimes gets difficult for fans to discern, especially fans that are new to deep diving into analysis and numbers and things like that. It's sometimes hard for them to discern who knows what the hell they're talking about and who doesn't. But I can tell you right now, to everyone who's watching this right now, these three guys know what the hell they're talking about. And anytime you know what the hell you're talking about, we don't even have to agree all the time. I just need you to know what the hell you're talking about.
Right.
It makes for a much more fruitful, productive, and fun conversation. On top of that, not only do you guys know the game and you know the numbers and you know how to present your points, but you're out here grinding, and you're not asking for handouts from anybody. Like you're getting it from the mud, like KD did, like myself, and like others. And if I respect nothing on this earth before I leave, other than my family and things like that, it's people who put in work and don't have their hand out.
Right.
Those are the guys and the gals that you want to bless when you can. So I had absolutely no problem, when James reached out to me and said, "Hey man, we got to have you on. Let's do it." And I can tell you right now, and this is not a high horse thing, because I'm probably one of the more humble guys that you'll ever meet, one of the most humble people you ever meet. But I have people who ask me to come on and do this with them and that with them. But they just drop the ball. They don't know how to follow up. Their presentation is not up to par. And I get it. Sometimes the money ain't there, but it's how you present yourself. And you guys are top shelf, man. Like, you guys are top shelf. I knew coming on I was going to have a blast, and all day I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to jump on with you guys. And I can honestly say that's not always the case with everybody I do a spot with. There are some spots where I absolutely love doing it with them. Some spots I kind of do because, why not? You guys are not a why not. You guys are I can't wait to get on and part of the language and shoot the shit with you guys because, you know the game. You watch the film. You're not regurgitating. You got fresh points. And whether I agree with the points or not, you want to cut Tyrone Crawford. You're crazy. But we can talk about it, right? Because it's not a hot take.
Right.
Yeah. It's not a hot take because you can back up your take. Right.
Right.
So you guys just keep up the great work. I see where you came from. I see where you're going, even if you don't see where you're going. Just keep pumping along. And I see nothing but blessings upon blessings coming for you guys. Aim for the stars, man, and anything that KD can do, and I can speak for him when it comes to this. Anything he can do to help you guys move forward, anything I can do to help you guys move forward. I'm all about blessing. I'm all about blessing the next person because I'm not where I got where I am because people took it upon themselves to bless me. Yeah, they believed in me, they blessed me, so I try to pay it forward as often as I can and to those that deserve it. And you guys more than deserve it. So anytime you want to have me back on, just reach out. I'll jump at the opportunity as long as we can stop pretending baseball is not great.
I was gonna say, it ain't just Tyler Crawford.
Bring that beat back.
Yeah, as long as we can stop pretending. This guy said he was a Braves fan. Like, stop it. And just so you know, this is some ultra pettiness. So, KD, I know you're gonna watch this, right?
You're gonna talk about them natties.
Yeah, normally, I do my polo and I have the luxuriousness fully free.
You put the A in his face.
Yeah, but I saw that curly W on his head. I was like, no, I gotta counterbalance this.
So I'm gonna put it next to each other.
He came and dragged that porta potty through you guys' podcast. I had to clean. This is cleanup duty. This is cleanup duty. So, but yeah, man, I had a blast. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you guys for having me. Keep up the great work. And anytime you want me on, just reach out, and I'm here to drop a bat.
Hey, thanks
everyone. Drop of a Braves hat.
No, don't drop that. Remember, look, all the members get telling you, hop on this because we had a conversation behind the scene about these Braves and stuff. Hey, and shout out to everybody in the chat, man. It's amazing me sometimes that people stay from the start to finish, or they check back in. Because we go like we talked about, and it means a whole hell of a lot. Because honestly, we wouldn't be able to get all these people if you guys didn't tune in and make the show what it is. So thank you guys for rocking out. I mean, we was in here about 600 deep from start to finish, which is a lot of people for a Tuesday night. That
tells you a lot about the quality of content that you guys are putting out. Because somebody would rather sit through 2 hours of what you guys and what we're talking about than 10 minutes of what than 10 minutes of what somebody else is talking about. Right. Yeah, the somebody else is plural. The somebody else's.
A whole bunch of somebody else's P.
I love what you said about
I'm telling you.
Deep diving.
Don't get me started, man. The junk science.
It ain't even science. It's what is it? It's like beginner level.
It's Lego on the kindergarten carpet before nap time is what it is.
And tell you something, this ain't for everybody. The deep diving, like you talked about, a lot of people can't deal with that. They like the hollering and the hooping and the buzzwords and the buzz phrases. But this right here, that's why, man, I love our fans that really are into the deep diving of this stuff, because I'm sure it makes it worth it for you. Because your articles, it ain't for the soft folk. It ain't for the folk that just wants to look at the stuff on the surface and not dive in. It ain't
for the regular fan.
It's science,
right?
If you don't know, it's almost like when the Wu came out with everybody was waiting for that album. They was like, when that Wu come out with that other album? They dropped their big album, and they had a little part, and they said, "Hey, man, this is mathematics, dog. You just ain't gonna get this anywhere. You ain't gonna just understand this. This is the Wu. This is mathematics.
Right.
This when Pat write an article, if you don't know what the hell you doing, don't read it.
Don't read it.
Or even to add on to that, if it's your first time kind of deep diving in and whatever, just have an open mind.
Please.
Yeah.
Right. You can't walk into a situation and know that you need to learn some things and then yell at the teacher because you don't like what they're teaching. right?
Message.
It's fine. At the end of the day, and I tell cats this all the time. They say, well, Pat, because I get a lot of up and comers, and I don't see myself as no longer an up and comer. I'll leave this earth viewing myself as an up and comer. I don't feel like I've ever achieved anything that I want to achieve, and that'll be 10 years from now. I just keep grinding away because you get complacent if you think otherwise. But for those that are coming up behind me and they're like, hey, Pat, what kind of advice can you give a young up and comer that's trying to solidify in this game and kind of get their voice out there? And my biggest thing is everybody's talking about the same thing. Look in the mirror every morning and ask yourself, why should somebody wait for you to start talking about it? When you're able to answer that question, you will have unlocked the door to how you can become one of the newest voices in this game. Everybody wants to be Walmart. Figure out how to be Saks Fifth Avenue.
Wow, deep.
That's how it goes. Now, you think Saks Fifth cares how many people walk in their store? It's not about the quantity of people walking in the store. It's about who can afford to be in the store. So you got to value your content like that. Like don't dumb down your stuff.
Never.
To be Walmart. Don't dumb down your stuff to be. Yeah, I mean you can cheapen your stuff and you can dumb down your points and you can pander and you can do all of these things so that you become a Dollar General or a Family Dollar, and you'll get a whole bunch of traffic. But at the end of the day, they only came because you're cheap.
Yeah. Ooh, deep.
They only came because you're easy. So be the person. Number one, be yourself. Never sacrifice your integrity of who you are to try to scoop something. I could have scooped 100 things in this week alone, but it's not about how many scoops you can get. It's about accuracy. It's about making sure that you're given the right information, and it's about making sure that at the end of the day, people trust you.
So you won't have that TMZ type of feel.
You go.
Yeah.
I don't do the tabloid angle.
Yeah.
The whole, I heard this. No. I hear a lot of things, but you don't hear me say I hear a lot of things because not everything needs to be put out there. And not everything is accurate. Some things are just headline grabs. And, just don't be a clickbaiter and don't be
that dude.
Don't be that dude or that girl, that woman. That gal. That's like, oh, well, the only way I'm going to get my name out there is if I'm first at everything. And the hell with being first at everything. Yeah. Because the one who's first at everything isn't always the one who's last at everything. And let me phrase that a different way. Just because you said something first doesn't mean you were right or better than the person who comes behind you and says it again. So
listen, I've seen that with you, with your work. I've seen people report it first.
You say it
when you report it and write on it. It means much more in my opinion because you actually do the work for the report, not report breaking news, boom, and that's it. It's report breaking news. And here's why.
and it's not every little thing. Like you can't run with every little thing. You got to substantiate it. Right. So if a text message came through right now that said player X is upset and about to demand a trade, I'm not going to put that out just yet. I have work to do now. Right. I'm going to reach out to that player. I'm going to reach out to their agent. I'm going to reach out to sources within the team. Have you heard this? Have you heard this? And if I can't get it substantiated, it's not going to come from me. And guess what? If somebody else can substantiate it first, or if somebody else runs with it before substantiating it first, that's not my problem. It's not my problem. Because if it turns out that it was false, that's on your name, right?
And they will not forget it.
You know what Scarface said? All a man has in this world is what?
My balls and my word.
Don't sacrifice them for nobody.
Nobody.
He said, hey, Sosa.
Don't sacrifice them for nobody.
He said, hey, Sosa.
And with that said, say hello to my little friend, the button. Because if I don't press that button, we ain't going to get out of here, Pat.
Boy, that was on time. Boy, that was a good one right there, Sky. I like you for that one.
Shout out to Patrik Walker, CBS Sports. Shout out to all the super chats, all the subscribers, all the new members. Appreciate y'all for rocking out. We'll be back next Tuesday. Make sure y'all subscribe to all of our channels if you haven't. And follow him on Twitter. Voice of the Star.
Please.
He's a beast.
The Star.
Peace.
Peace.
Be good.